What keeps you awake at night?
Sea levels are rising globally.
Fears fueled by horror stories.
Among the worst flu season in a decade, and it hasn't peaked yet.
We all know the atomic bomb is very dangerous.
Another series of deadly terror attacks.
I don't want to be blamed if you cannot get to sleep tonight.
Welcome to Things That Keep You Up at Night. I'm Olivia.
I am Brooke.
I'm Brie.
Okay, it worked that time. God bless. Welcome back. This week we are wrapping up our series on groupthink.
Yes, we are.
Very stoked. Very pessimistic about this topic already. So
We
I doubt I will feel more optimistic after this episode.
Oh, no, it's totally lighthearted. Complete shift from the last two. Pinky swear.
All right.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, totally.
That's great.
So for the last couple weeks, we have been looking at groupthink. Last week, we focused on sort of small scale with the Stanford prison experiment, if you listen to that. Before that, we got a horrifying overview of the revolutionary communist China. This week, I want to dive into something that's a little bit in the middle, that everyone has heard of. Super light, really airy. It's an event that has inspired movies and television and theater for decades, one that has become synonymous with the phrase mob mentality. You already know I'm back on my bullshit with the Salem Witch Trials.
Oh, hell yeah!
Yay!
Oh,
Okay.
so
Hell
exciting.
yeah.
So, if you've ever seen The Crucible or one of literally hundreds of films and TV shows about witch trials, then you probably already have a decent understanding of what happened in a nutshell. Some girls started acting weird, they started pointing fingers at random people, a whole lot of people got hanged. As it turns out, this was just the tip of the iceberg, which I didn't know before researching this. Who knew?
Yeah, can I be honest with you? That is all I know.
Yeah, that's it, right?
So,
Because that's all they
you're
really
like-
teach you.
Right. All I
You're
know
like,
is
just a summary. I'm like, yep,
That's what
a
I
summary
know.
of everything I know about this.
right.
So.
'Cause I read the Crucible in high school in my
Sure.
abnormal psychology class. We talked about how just like the Salem Witch Trials was just fucking awful.
Yeah.
And we covered that, but then we also talked about how there was actual no hangings in the United States, or no, not hangings. There was no burning at the crosses in the United States, but that was in like
Yeah.
European countries. But that's legitimately
Yes.
all I know.
Okay.
Nice.
So you've got a nice
Nice.
little anecdote there.
Right.
Yeah, so just to start us off, a question. What do you think the goal of witch trials are? Not this one in particular, but just all of them.
Get rid of witches.
Okay, Brie?
I guess like what do you mean? Just like what a definition of what the witch trials are to us? Like
No, like, what do you think they were trying to do when they were trying people for witchcraft?
they would. Because I know some of them would just be like different like trials you had to go under, not like physical trial or not like an actual like judge jury trial, but like they would drown you in some cases.
Yeah.
They would torture
End
you.
goal.
End goal, yeah, was, so I think what we're saying is get rid of witches, kill them, make them go away.
Right.
Yeah.
You are wrong. You are actually dead wrong.
Oh, God, I knew I was being set up.
Right? Yeah. It's so obvious. I'm so sorry. Witch trials, they dated back to early 1300s in Europe. The last one ended in Switzerland in 1782, which was about 100 years after the Salem Witch Trials. So during that period, almost 100,000 people were tried as witches, most of them women, and around 60,000 of them were executed. So all of the hunts, the ones in Europe and the ones in America, had one thing in common, and that their goal was not to kill known witches. The goal was to identify more witches. They wanted to use the ones that they knew
What the fuck?
were witches to find others who were engaging in witchcraft. So,
What the
So it's like a Men in Black of witches.
it truly is.
That is that's the most backwards thinking. Like, can you imagine they did that today? They're like, we're gonna go to a random neighborhood, arrest some dude. Doesn't fucking matter. Just arrest some dude
Yeah.
on the suspicion of burglary. And then you see that's how we're gonna find other real burglars.
Right, exactly. So, because it's a crime ring, right? If you're a witch, you know all the other witches. That's good logic.
Right.
Right. So, the authorities that were involved with the particulars of witch hunts all across Europe and in America almost never focused on pursuing those they had actually confirmed, air quotes, I hope you can hear the air quotes, to be witches,
Yeah.
but rather use them as bait, or not so much bait, but like as accusers to find others of whom they were uncertain. So,
Cool.
a witch to these people was anyone who, and I quote, were considered to be followers of Satan who had traded their souls for his assistance. It was believed that they employed demons to accomplish magical deeds, and that they changed from human to animal form, or from one human form to another, that animals acted as their familiar spirits, and that they rode through the air at night to secret meetings and orgies.
Fuck yeah!
Yeah! Sounds like fun, right?
That sounds fucking awesome.
Oh,
Yeah,
hell
orgies were
What
involved.
would be your animal companion? Mine would be a ferret.
Cat for sure.
I
let's
just
be
like the
honest.
classic cat.
Right.
It's just...
Is that cliche?
It kind of is. I think we're just basic bitches, though.
We go to like a witch meeting and everybody's got their familiar. They got like ferrets and otters, and like we walk in with cats and
They're like, oh,
Boom, raven.
with this guy. Oh yeah, the one guy with the raven. They're like, really, dude? Gotta be
they
so
just like
extra.
welcome in and they're like, oh my god, Steven, I didn't know we invited you.
Steven's back.
God.
Stevens is like literally like the lamest animal of all time. What would that be? Stevens is like a fucking like oh god,
He's got like a ladybug, and they're like, oh boy.
oh
It's
god,
Steven.
Steven's back.
He's like, I just want to do something a little, non-conspicuous, and like they're so cute.
I just think you're Steven.
Yeah,
buddy,
they
I
sure
just think
are.
you're missing the point of the whole dark arts point behind of it. 'Cause we do worship
They've
Satan.
got dark spots.
Also, can I just, side note, Stephen the Witch is the most hilarious thing I've ever heard.
Wait, okay, so wait, quick question.
Yeah.
We're speaking of Stephen. Were men tried as witches, or was it just
They were, less often, but they
Right.
were tried,
Right.
just across the board.
right?
So, yeah, essentially what this came down to was people in authority imposing the label of witch on disenfranchised people and then forcing them to label other people to avoid persecution.
Oh man.
So, as you can imagine, there's no real scientific method for identifying witches. Usually it was just accusation, and that began with rumor, and once the rumor mill started, it almost always ended in conviction and eventually in execution. So, let's travel to Salem, kids, 1962. I'm sorry, 1692.
I was gonna say
1962 was
62. Oh,
very
hell
recent.
fucking yeah.
Ooh, yeah, and then they were on acid, and it was great.
Those were the better times.
Right? Oh my god, so simple. So simple. Okay, so I didn't know this before doing my research for today, but there were actually 2 Salems in Massachusetts at the time. There was Salem Town. Oh, I know, mind-blowing already. So there was Salem Town on Massachusetts Bay, which was a relatively large port community, and then there was Salem Village, which was a small, kind of poor farming community of about 500 people. So the village, which was technically part of Salem Town, was marked by its own social hierarchies and tensions, separate from the town. Notably, the tension between 2 of the most powerful families, the Porters and the Putnams. We've got like a class system going on surrounding these families. So the Porters were what was that?
I love that. I just like the last name, the Porters and the Putnams.
Hell yeah, they need their own reality show.
Oh fuck! Sorry, continue.
Maybe one of those Mormon reality shows where each of them has like 32 kids.
Oh no!
Well, 'cause I just
And it's
imagine
like the intro is like the gag is they can't fit all the kids into one shot, and like it's a lighthearted joke, but the cameraman is actually like, why are we trying?
Right.
Why put in the effort?
Well, my whole
you
thing
know?
is, I imagine the Porters are all like really, really like starving, frail, thin, except for the father. He's just a big
He's just
boy.
like huge. Yeah,
He eats all
he's-
the food that goes to the household.
an
He's
absolute
the big man.
unit.
He gets the chicken.
He gets all the chicken, the only chicken. So the Porters were well connected with Salem's town merchants, and therefore had greater fiscal authority over everybody. They were like the Kardashians of Salem. The Putnams, on the other hand, were lobbying for greater autonomy for the village, separate from the town, and were highly respected among the poor farmers in their community. Essentially, the Putnams sort of set the standard of behavior with Salem Village. Records of interfamily disputes over land and property were frequent, but it basically came down to families verbally bitch-slapping each other until they got something out of it. I'm not actually making that up. There are records of it turning into fist fights over land. So that's cool.
Perfect.
So the divide in Salem Village was actually exacerbated by Samuel Paris. He was a merchant from Boston and a Harvard College student, not a graduate. I will let that speak for itself. When he arrived,
He audited a few classes and was like,
he went and then he just didn't graduate. He attended. He was like an actual student. But yeah, so he arrived in Salem. He became a pastor in the village's congregational church. He brought along his wife, his 3 children, 1 niece, and 2 slaves, who are called John, Indian, and Tituba. And Tituba you might recognize from The Crucible, because she is a named character.
hold on.
Yeah.
Question really, really quick. He gets the name John. And they're like, John, we gotta give you good Christian names.
I knew.
You shall be Chichiba.
I love
and
it.
she's like, I don't speak English really well, so like I could be completely wrong on this, but pretty sure Chichiba's not in the Bible. But that's just me. Oh my god, that is so weird.
Yep.
Okay, whatever. Just seems like
I also love that they gave him a last name and they were like Indian. Yeah. So
oh my god. And I want to imagine like it's at the office as they're registering him. They're like, "What's his name?" And they're like, let's give him a good Christian name.
John. Yeah.
John. And they're like, "Okay, and his last name?"
Oh shit.
Yeah,
They didn't plan that far ahead.
Indian. Okay. Next one? Yeah, just call her Chichiba. It doesn't fucking matter.
It's whatever. So, moving right along, early into his time in Salem, he began pushing for higher than his already abnormally high wages, and he also wanted ownership of the parsonage. This, coupled with his staunchly puritanical approach to Christianity, divided his congregation. He was known to have actually asked his non-member churchgoers to leave the congregation before celebrating communion. Super cool dude. Ultimately, the village was divided by those who were pro-Porter or pro-Putnam, and those who were pro-Paris and anti-Paris. So, remember Samuel Paris's slaves, because we were just talking about him 10 seconds ago?
Uh-oh.
So, Tituba in particular is really, really important to the story. Nobody knows if she was originally from the Caribbean or Africa, but we can say with a fair amount of certainty that she wasn't super popular in Salem. Probably because she was brown.
Well,
You know, I literally thought you were going to say, and I think we can all, like, guess, is that what you said?
Yeah.
She was probably not white. And I was like, oh, you didn't go there. And then you did go there.
I
You
did
just took
kinda.
a little bit of a right turn.
Yeah, no, it was curved. I didn't want to go straight there, you know?
I thought you were gonna say because of her name.
Yeah, because you don't like Tituba doesn't sound white. Come on, Brie. It's 2018. Stop living in the past.
Right, continue.
So, it was theorized that Tituba's prompting inspired Betty Paris, Samuel's 9-year-old daughter, and Abigail Williams, his 11-year-old niece, to begin dabbling in fortune-telling. Gasp. So, this, of course, was information given by Abigail and Betty themselves, so the extent of Tituba's influence is actually unknown. After all, no one asked the slave woman for her side of the story. Go fucking figure.
Why fucking would you?
Yeah, right? Like, what? Things began to heat up when Abigail and Betty started showing strange psychological symptoms and physiological symptoms, including screaming, making odd noises, sometimes interpreted by the villagers as speaking in tongues, contortions, and reports of biting and pinching sensations on their skin.
Nice.
Now, let's pause for a minute and go over the possible causes of these symptoms, shall we? On one hand, we have Satan possession and demonic influence.
Right.
Like,
The only
Good
answer.
start. Really
Right.
good start. On the other hand, we have actual medical diagnoses that range from encephalitis to epilepsy to child abuse to a fairly new theory, including convulsive ergotism. So,
Would this have been rare, or do you think it was something that could have happened, like a general thing?
the symptoms that they were showing?
Right.
So, I'm gonna get to that. The biological stuff is pretty much debunked at this point, although we can't know with any certainty, because of the timing. I'll get into that in a second. But there is a school of thought that says that the convulsive ergotism is pretty convincing, and ergotism is a condition that is brought on by a fungus that infects rye. So the bread and the cereal of the Puritans would have been infected with this fungus, which can cause similar symptoms to the ones that they reported having.
Those bitches loved their rye.
Right? Well, and ergot, the fungus, is one of the ingredients of LSD. So they were having a real good time if that was the case. So...
Actually, yeah, thinking about that too, because that was also the time period where, like, saying, you know, this is a plausible explanation.
Yeah.
They weren't drinking fresh water.
No.
They were drinking alcohol, like beer. That was their only source of water that they could get because the alcohol would sterilize it.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Are you fucking actually serious? The only thing that they had to drink was alcohol?
Dope.
They just didn't drink water? That seems crazy.
They didn't have access to water.
Hard,
I guess at first.
If it's... I don't know how accessible it was in America, but I know at the very least the reason why you see, like, so many people drinking wine and beer in Europe is because, like, legitimately it was easy to get wine
than
and beer.
clean water. Sure.
Yeah.
And clean water
So
was,
I
like, an
think-
impossibility back then anyway, so, yeah.
Yeah. So it could have easily just been, like, they were not only eating it, but, like, that was their main drinking supply was beer.
Yeah,
So-
and the rye would have all been contaminated at that point anyway. So anything they were eating with rye, which was a staple of their diet, would have caused these symptoms. So the reason why that's not super likely is that it wasn't a widespread thing or widespread enough to be this fungus, because it would have affected everybody. And also the timing of the behavior looks very suspicious when you look at the broad picture. So what ended up happening was a few people started showing symptoms, and then it spread to people who had never been in contact with rye or the other girls. So the idea that it was microbial or any sort of thing like that is kind of unlikely, but there are people who believe that that is possible. And it's definitely more likely than demonic possession. My theory...
I don't know about that, but...
is that it was a case of suggestion, a combination of political and social pressure, and the recent release of the book Memorable Providences Relating to Witchcraft and Possessions by Cotton Mather, which is an awesome name. And it outlined a case of a family in Boston whose children were allegedly bewitched. So it's likely that Abigail and Betty were aware of the Boston case and were influenced to replicate the behavior outlined in the book because Paris had a copy of the book in his home where they lived.
Yeah, you know, I was gonna say too, like, how old are these kids? Because I was known to do some pretty crazy things for attention.
Oh yeah, no, let's keep in mind that these girls were 9 and 11 years old.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
like, I probably said
yeah.
some pretty weird shit when I was 11. I definitely made up stories to sound cool to my stupid friends. And, like...
Well, and sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, and, you know, like, with, like, you pick up things in your environment, right? As a kid, when you play, you pick up what grown-ups talk about, you think what grown-ups talk about is cool, and how many of those, you know, like, church services they had to sit through where, you know, their pastor was telling them that Satan was inside them, they were all inherently evil.
For sure, absolutely.
So I think they took a bit of that also, plus mixed with the book, and they played pretend, like kids do, and then when they were actually starting to receive such attention, like, it just made common sense to kind of commit to that bit, you know?
Gotta commit to the bit.
Why are you the way that you are?
But, like, think about just, like, you're in it, right? And, like, I mean, I read The Crucible, so, you know.
Right, yeah, resident expert.
Right, so...
God, everybody's read a fucking book these days.
Okay.
Jesus Christ.
But, you
I'm the
know...
only one that hasn't read The Crucible. Whatever.
So, like, when they're, like, convulsing in bed, they're getting attentions of, like, doctors and churchmen and things like that, and it's like, they're like, oh, shit, now it's real. We gotta keep this shit going. Like,
sure.
You know,
and it's possible that the intention was to get attention from these people. When it got really serious and people started dying, you know, like, I don't think it occurred to these girls especially that their actions would have such serious consequences. And yeah, you're absolutely right that their behavior was most likely a result of their environment. And being 9 and 11 years old, imitation is a key part of childhood development. Children learn who they are by imitating the authority figures in their lives, and that extends to adults that children look up to, and to figureheads that they see from afar. So, like, kids these days, they emulate celebrities. I hate to bring him into this, but Logan Paul, for example.
Oh my god.
Oh, I could do a whole thing on Logan Paul, but I won't. So it makes sense that they would be imitating the things that they see, and their main source of authority was a fire and brimstone pastor who they lived with. So it's no wonder that they were both terrified of and fascinated by the occult.
Right.
So that's my personal theory, that they stumbled across this book or some incarnation of witch damnation in their lives and started imitating what they saw.
Right, because you know that dude was sitting at the table just like, you're all gonna burn in hell because you're all like fucking Satan's scum, you know?
Uncle Samuel, you're drooling in your peas again.
You know what I can imagine too? It's just like they're like having some fun, they're imitating some shit, like they're getting a rile out of it, and then like one day they just like come outside and someone's being burned, and they're like, oh.
Well, I took that a little. In hindsight, I could have handled that better.
Hindsight is 2020.
2020. You know, it's a learning experience for everyone. I'm growing up. You know, it's just.
Did
hard.
their like convulsions stop after like persecution started?
You know, nothing I read talked about how the girls fared after.
Right.
It's all very suspicious just during the trial. I would assume so, that once people started getting killed, or I guess once the trials were ordered to stop, the symptoms stopped along with it, because there was no attention anymore. But yeah, there's nothing that I read about that. But, so yeah, we've got these kids who start fortune telling, among other things, emulating the things that they see, the things that they hear about. They start convulsing, speaking in tongues. You get the idea. So, once Samuel Parris saw his charges, his niece and his daughter, all hopped up on devil juice, he immediately started putting pressure on them to identify who had cursed them. So I don't know about you, but if I'm 9 years old and my zealot religious father/uncle starts demanding to know the source of my demonic affliction, I'd be more than a little nervous, especially after the pea cake incident. What is the pea cake incident? I hear you asking. What is that? Oh, I'm so glad you asked. So, when Abigail and Betty first started showing symptoms of devil possession and such, Tituba immediately became concerned for her own safety, most likely worried that she would be blamed for the actions of the children. She was very smart. So she baked, with the help of the children, what is known as a witch cake, also could be called a witch biscuit, which was a cake made from rye flour and the urine of the affected person and then fed to a dog.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they were weird. So
they deserve that.
Yeah, with rye, of course. So they believed that this would aid in uncovering the identity of the witch. As you might have guessed, the pea cake didn't actually uncover anything, but it did succeed.
Are you fucking joking
me? I know, I'm so sorry to burst that bubble. But
I've done like 4 of those.
There was so much science backing the pea cake.
I know, the poor pea cake. But what it did do is succeed in royally pissing off Samuel Parris, who thought that the cake was an act of blasphemy. So, at Samuel's urging, the girls named 3 women as witches. The first, shocker, shocker, was Tituba. The other, I know we were all rooting for her, but it had to happen, you know? Yeah. The others were marginalized and largely non-religious members of the community. A beggar named Sarah Good and an elderly bedridden woman named Sarah Osborne. It's always the Sarahs.
2 Sarahs?
2 Sarahs, I know, right? It's crazy. It's important to note that Sarah Good was known throughout the community as being of an angry temperament. And was a pariah on the village. She would go door to door and ask for shelter and food, and if they said no, she would get abusive. And Sarah Osborne had been condemned by the village for having a romantic affair with an indentured servant. Scandal!
Oh, fuck her.
I know, right? Who the fuck are these people? So, the women were formally accused, and at first each of them maintained their own innocence, though Sarah Good did initially accuse Osborne. After repeated pressuring by town committees, Tituba relented on her initial story and fabricated a story about being visited by Satan himself, during which encounter she was shown a book with Sarah Osborne, Sarah Good, and 7 other names that she conveniently couldn't read. So, am I right?
Honestly, though, like, that's, like, another smart move of, like, definitely some of the people we know are witches, but, like, I have this thing with my vision, like, second half of my vision just, like, it's not optimal.
Yeah, I can only scan so much on a page, and then it just, like, gives out. It's crazy.
I gotta see someone about this, but, you know,
but,
healthcare in this town is
glasses
awful.
haven't been invented yet, and it's, like, this crazy
I totally forgot glasses haven't been invented.
Fuck yeah, because Ben Franklin made glasses. Wow.
Well, he made bifocals, but I don't know who made glasses first.
Shit, when were glasses invented?
Yeah, go for it. I don't know. I'm gonna hate to find out that I was wrong. I'm gonna look like a fool in front of the internet!
1268.
God damn it! Fuck. No, alright, well, bye, guys. It's been real. It's been really fun. Okay, so she tells everybody that she found this book, that she was shown a book with these names, said she couldn't read the others. For 3 days, she was forced to give testimony in as vivid detail as possible. 3 days she was forced. Records show that she spoke of Satan's animal familiars and a, quote, tall, dark man from Boston who had forced her to sign the devil's book. Her testimony was seen as condemning evidence for the other women's guilt, and hysteria claimed the village of Salem, Massachusetts. So, it was not long before other women and girls began suddenly experiencing symptoms of the accursed, and those who were afflicted immediately began pointing fingers. At this point, the accused were not only the disenfranchised and the oppressed, but also began including some of the more notable members of society. So, in almost all the cases, the accused were enemies of the Putnam family. Interesting.
Wow.
The Putnams would be primary prosecutors in dozens of the trials, and I'm no expert, but this sort of gives the appearance of a socio-political agenda, rather than a genuine fear of the occult.
Oh, fuck, it's like, hey, Becky, you know, you've been feeling ill lately? No, Dad, I'm fine. Papa, what's the matter?
Papa?
You know? Sorry.
She cracked herself up, my friends.
And so, you know, but Papa, what could be wrong? Well, I think that you're feeling a little, you know, feeling a little ill because, you know, John down the street has some property out back. He just installed a pool, you know, and I feel like it'd be really beneficial for us.
He has those sweet, sweet butter churns, and I just gotta get my hands on them. Am I right, guys?
She's just like completely oblivious to the whole thing. Like he keeps he's doing the thing where his eyebrows raise like super fucking high, and he's like,
meanwhile,
I think it would be great if we could get 2 more butter churns. And she's like, that would be wonderful, Papa. And you're
maybe
God
at the end
fucking damn it, Mary.
Maybe at the end of winter, we can have enough of a harvest. God damn it! I want you to be a witch.
So the Putnams were the primary prosecutors. Almost all of the people who were tried were enemies of their family. Give sort of an agenda to all the trials. What's so fascinating about groupthink is that it was most likely both an agenda and an actual fear of the occult. Now, I don't doubt that there was fear of the devil in Salem back then. So I can see how it would disguise their socio-political agenda as hysteria. It's possible that the vindictiveness of the Putnams' actions were subconscious to a degree, and were being covered by the chaos of the witch hunt. It became cyclical, as it were. So now we can get into the fun of the actual trials. Informal hearings and subsequent imprisonments had been held for weeks until finally the governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony, Sir William Phipps, which is my favorite name in this entire story, intervened, demanding that some order be put to the hysteria. Finally, someone's going to talk some sense into these people, right?
Right.
finally a man comes in.
Right? A man with... He's going to get right down to business. So... He calls for what was known as the Court of Oyer and Termine, where...
Oh, wow.
Which basically means... I know, right? I'm just so impressive.
So
Essentially,
fancy.
that just means that the court would listen to the accused and then also the victims, and then they would decide their fate. It's one of the earliest instances of the U.S. court system as we know it today. So the accused would...
so ass backwards and prosecuting people for nothing?
Oh, you wait, my dear. You just wait. So, the accused would defend themselves to 7 judges on counts of witchcraft and conspiracy with the devil. Defendants were forced to defend themselves without any counsel whatsoever, and that was a requirement of their trial. They could not have help. The evidence against them was nearly all hearsay, by today's standards, but the most damning evidence of all included, quote, spectral evidence. This was any witness account of demonic possession at all and could be as vague as testimonies of pinching sensations. That was enough. Even while the accused gave their testimonies, alleged victims would sit in the gallery and shake and writhe and scream, and this was also considered damning evidence. Super fair, super cool.
My God.
Yay! You're loving
Can you
it,
imagine,
right?
like, one of the jurors just has, like, a psychosomatic twitch, and, like, they literally can't fucking control it, and every time they twitch, the court's like, see, here, she's executing her powers, and the person is just too embarrassed to admit that it's a twitch. They're like, yeah.
Can you imagine having Tourette's during this?
Jesus.
Ooh. Like,
That's not good.
That's no good, man. And I can see how someone would be like, yeah, they're a witch, totally.
Yeah, I'm not fucking like this.
No, I don't have a thing. Yeah, so anything that made it look like the defendants were exacting their power over the victims was enough. So another popular form of evidence was known as the touch test, which eventually was stopped. It was outlawed, but it involved the accused being forced to touch one of their alleged victims while they were having a fit. If the fit stopped, this was considered evidence enough for a conviction. Because that was them having power.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
Do you know how easy it would be to just kill someone off if you just started twitching and you're like, ooh, I hate Mary. I hope Mary touches me. And then you just stop.
Like, oh, shit.
Well, that's what happened. That's exactly what fucking happened, though.
Pretty much, yeah. Oh, also, any discovery of small dolls, also known as poppets, ointments, perfumes, or books on palmistry or horoscopes would also result in a conviction. So if you had a bottle of lotion...
How am I supposed to know what my
shit.
horoscope was for that day?
I know.
Okay, what about my dry hands?
Yeah,
Do you think we
I
just
need
get
some
this
fucking
rye
lotion.
for free? Do you know how hard it is to shaft a rye every fucking day?
Listen, I'm a Taurus, and I make really stubborn decisions, alright? So I just need guidance, I feel like, sometimes.
Maybe I just like dolls. Like, what if you had kids? Can you imagine? And your kids had dolls lying around the house?
That shit's getting burned right away.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, the only way, you might be wondering, how does one escape conviction? How do you not get executed during the Salem Witch Trials? The only way to escape execution was to condemn another witch. There was no other way to avoid it. If a defendant confessed and named another, they would be passed over by the court for the simple reason that God would exact vengeance on them when they died. The benefits of a Puritan court. Yeah,
The one agnostic guy is like oh, thank fucking Christ.
Yeah. So anyone who maintained their innocence throughout was immediately convicted and executed for their perceived crimes. People were pressured into admitting their guilt simply for the reason that it would save their lives.
Right.
Most were hanged. One particularly gruesome instance was the case of Giles Corey. He was also included in the crucible. He was pressed by increasingly heavy stones until his lungs collapsed 2 days later.
Oh my god.
Yeah, super fun.
Ooh.
Those who, in the community who viewed the trials as, like, inhuman, they remained silent. Many feared that if they spoke out against the trials, they would be accused of witchcraft themselves. One of those people her name was Rebecca Nurse. She was a figurehead in the community. She was hugely influential, and she spoke out against the trials, and she was immediately tried and convicted, and she was killed. So that's super awesome. So no one is safe.
Right.
No one is safe. And as the trials progressed, accusations began cropping up all over other cities. Among them were Beverly, Malden, Gloucester, Andover, Lynn, Marblehead, Charlestown, and Boston. Governor Phipps finally stepped in to rein in the trials. Why do you think he did? What do you think was the catalyst?
Because one of his family members was being accused, or...
Ding, 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 give that girl a prize. It was his wife. His wife got accused. And he was like, whoa, guys. Just gotta rein it in here. That's fucking nuts. Don't Don't kill my wife, please. After he stopped it and had secured his wife and her safety, the trials resumed. Afterwards, they only...
okay.
But they only
I was like, wow, she's wrapping it up really early, and then you're like, no.
Oh, no, there's not all that much left. No, there's not that much left. But she was fine, and then the trials resumed. They only resulted in 3 more convictions before stopping for good in 1693. I almost said 1963 again, because I'm an idiot. Okay. So, how many people do you think died during this particular witch hunt?
I feel like maybe 12.
Okay, Brie?
I want to say 50.
Okay, somewhere in the middle. You guys are actually right on the money. It was 33. 33 people had been convicted and executed. I've heard people say that hundreds were killed. They don't know bullshit. It's 33. 5 others had actually died in custody while they were in prison, waiting for their trials. 2 of them were infant children. Yeah, super cool.
What caused them... Wait, I'm so sorry. Pause. What caused them, infant children, to be accused of being witches? Like, I don't understand.
There's
Crying a lot.
Oh, yeah, right? Like, they're just fucking annoying little bitches.
Could not get a minute alone.
Jesus, is Casey Anthony one of the citizens of Salem, you know what I'm saying?
Can you imagine, like, being a mother and, like, your child has not stopped screaming for 3 solid days. She's, like, colicky, and you're like, I know how to solve this. And you, like, look outside at like, Gallows Hill, and you're like, oh, no. Am I gonna do this? Yes.
He's, like, sipping a water glass really slowly. Like,
no, but that's so real. That's so real, though, because postpartum depression, dude.
That's not actually most likely what happened. There's really little information on the infants, but what was most likely the case was that their mothers had been convicted and that they wouldn't be allowed to just be in their father's care because fathers aren't caretakers, right? So they were most likely just the children of convicted witches, and they just died in prison along with their parents. Yay! So... generally speaking, afterwards, they tried to kind of brush it under the rug, because people started to point out, hey, this was a kind of shitty thing that we did, and the government was like, yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. So in 1711, 22 of the 33 convicts were exonerated by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Their families were given £600 for their trouble, which is equivalent to a little over $100,000 today. About $130,000 today.
Jesus.
Maybe a little more.
Well,
I don't know, man. Like, if you killed my wife...
consider how, like, cheap everything was at that point.
No,
like,
but...
what are you buying? You're not buying a TV.
Yeah,
you get, like,
and there's nothing to
food.
buy. Like,
yeah.
There's no, like, luxury item. So I suppose that secures your livelihood for quite a while.
Yeah.
But... you know, if my wife were murdered on the grounds of a fake thing, $130,000 would not be enough. Yeah. And also, notably, the last 11 convicts were not exonerated. They took 22 of them and were like, yeah, they were definitely not witches. Super sorry about that. But those 11 dudes, they definitely did it. Definitely in league with the devil.
What the
For
fuck?
sure. Finally, the last 11 convicts were exonerated because nobody fucking believes in witches anymore. When do you think the last 11 convicts were exonerated? Give me a date. Or, like...
1962?
Hilarious.
We're at 1692 right now. We're at 1692? Okay, so maybe like
1692, yeah.
1716?
Okay, yeah, so 1711 was when the 22 were exonerated.
Oh, fuck, are you joking? I was about to say 1711.
Damn.
But the last 11 were not exonerated until 2001.
What the fuck?
Hey, question hand raised. So they were alive?
No. So these are the people who were killed.
I know. I'm just thinking in my head, what's the point at that point?
There was literally no point in it. I think someone in city council noticed, oh, by the way, we still technically have it on the books that these 11 people were witches? Should we maybe fix that?
Can we set up this scene though, right? So Paul's in his bed, he's on the council, right? He's reading through some history books late at night, right? His wife Janice is like, babe, just come to bed. Come on, leave work at work. Let's go to bed. And then he's like, I just gotta look through this one last court. And then the back of the book kind of slips off, and it's this really old court trial of back in the day. Yeah. And he was like, oh yeah, geez, the Salem Witch Trials, that was a dark point in our country. And then he just starts to think about it, that C gets placed. It's 2000, right? And he's just sitting at his office at his day job did anybody do anything about that, or are we just gonna leave it on the records?
I mean...
The secretary that's been working there for 800 years, and she's just old and full of wrinkles, is like, oh no, those are in the physical folders, right? Because everything's transitioning from actual paper to computers, and he has to go to archaic folders that are wilting and falling apart, and he's like, hey, these people are still witches?
Right.
I just... Yeah. You know what, though? What I gotta respect is I bet that was actually a big fucking deal in their town.
Probably.
I bet Salem, people got together and they went to City Hall and clapped their hands when a plane lands. But when they free these people, they're like, we've done something good today, guys. Oh my God. And one guy
really
in the back is
on my
hey,
on my flight home, the guy next to me clapped during takeoff and the landing of the plane, and I wanted to punch him in the jaw.
Just euthanize yourself, sir.
Oh, well.
I'm sorry, that was serious. That was really serious. I didn't mean it. I didn't. I'm a bad person. I'm so sorry.
No, I've said a lot worse. We all know I've said
probably on the internet.
Terrible things.
Most likely.
Oh, it's all there.
It's all there. Recorded for this podcast. Enjoy, everyone. So, and you guys talked about the kids. Kids generally weren't convicted as witches, but they were questioned. What is her name? Martha Corey, I think? Giles Corey's wife. Martha Corey was charged, and their 4-year-old daughter was brought in for questioning. For a whole day, she was questioned, and her answers were timid, apparently, and they were construed as a confession.
Her answers were, quote-unquote, timid.
Yeah.
To say the least.
Yeah, her timid answers were enough to get her a conviction and ultimately got her killed. 4 years old. Very cool, very cool, very cool. So, yeah, essentially what we have is a bunch of people who had a political agenda and were able to make enough people afraid of something that doesn't exist and killed 33 people in response. Super cool stuff.
So just for the sake of, wrapping it up and, hashing out everything, I think we should talk about how, one thing that each of us feels has changed, whether it's, our opinion or perspective, something that's changed as a result of these 3 episodes, because we've talked about, a wide variety of topics. Anybody want to go first? Or I
would actually love to go first, because I have a thing off the top of my head.
Perfect, go.
Yeah, so you might have noticed, if you've been sticking with us for the last few episodes, I've been pretty insistent that the people that we learn about, the people, especially the specific instances, that these people are just sociopaths, and especially in the Stanford prison experiment, I was just vehement in my assertion that these kids are just crazy, who does that? And I can stick to my guns only so far now. After our discussion, I've come to the conclusion that I was unfair. I think that our brain is a far more delicate organism than I gave credit, or I guess lack of credit for. yeah, I guess my perspective has shifted from I could never do that, therefore why would anyone ever do that, to I can't imagine doing that right now, so what must it take to get someone to do these horrible, horrible things? And I think that there's a good example of that in each of our topics, and all of them are so different. With communist China, it's systemic in the government, it's your livelihood. With the Stanford prison experiment, it's much smaller scale, but I think with the different layers of mental and physical torture, it's similar. It creates a panic mode in your brain. And then with the Salem Witch Trials, of course, it's people capitalizing on hysteria and keeping it going for the sake of their own personal gain and so on, and attention also. I think that it takes a lot, but also a deceivingly little amount to make people act crazy.
For sure.
Right.
And I sincerely hope that I don't have to beat somebody to death chained to a radiator. But hey,
Don't we all?
You never know. You never know.
Right.
Good thoughts.
Yeah.
Snaps.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Olivia, do you want to go next, or do you want me to go next?
Yeah, so I got one. Y'all know me. I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm kind of a judgmental person.
No.
Shock.
No.
Right? I'm one of those people where,
out.
like, I'll immediately judge people. I'll immediately judge actions. It's a self-defense thing
Right.
due to, like, unchecked defense mechanisms. So I think this was so interesting for me because, I constantly listen to a ton of different media on, like, cults, murderers, everything like that.
Which I'm sure is so good for your psyche.
Oh my God, I bet it's not.
Good times.
And, like, I feel like I always judge them really harshly. Like,
Same.
obviously, they've done fucked up shit, and I'm never gonna, in any way, disregard a horrible thing that somebody does, right? But you look at these situations, and, like, I couldn't help, like, after all of these that I heard, but, like, to feel bad for the people who'd done those things. Like,
Right.
obviously, you feel bad for the victims. Because
Sure.
they had terrible things happen to them.
Yeah, of course.
But, like, I don't know, like, even those, like, kids that killed a guy chained to a radiator, like, those were kids.
They were children.
Right? Those were teenagers that had to live the rest of their life knowing that they did that. Brie's topic, that was, like, 20-year-old dudes in their prime before they really started the rest of their life.
Right.
Like, that had to have a lasting impact. And then, you have a community, like, think small towns are very, very intimate. You have a community of maybe a few hundred people, like, your best friend that has grown up your entire life is now being put on trial and you're the reason that she's on trial. Like, that can't be easy.
No way.
So at least, because we have our next episode topics picked, and it has required me to put aside a lot of my initial judgment and try to take in all of the information without assuming that they're terrible, terrible people for what they did.
Of course. Everybody's doing the best that they can.
Yeah.
Right.
Which
For
is
real.
so hard to, like, internalize, but it's true.
Yeah. So that was my little granule of knowledge, just trying to give people the benefit of the doubt, even when I feel like it's deplorable, it's awful, like, no rational human being would do this. Like, I don't know what I'd do in that situation.
Yeah.
And I doubt they would have ever said they would have done the same.
Oh, yeah. I don't think anybody would, like, when questioned, would go, yeah, I'd kill a dude. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe terrible people, but I think, for the most part, people are kind, which is a weird thing for me to come to terms with.
Yeah,
I'm very
whoa,
pessimistic.
who are you?
I know, what the fuck?
What the fuck? So, Brie.
It's interesting that Olivia wrapped it up with that, and it's very interesting because I have the exact opposite point of view.
No. I'm not judgmental at all, and now I hate everyone.
Well, God, me and Olivia have known each other for a really long time. We've become very good friends, and we tend to be opposites in that point of view, where I'm the optimist and Olivia's a little bit of a pessimist. Would I be wrong?
Shock.
I mean, I'm right. Well, you know, and nothing's wrong with that. And literally, like, and we have a give or take. We make each other realize things. It's a nice balance. But for this one, I'm very cynical about what I learned this week, and I'm gonna let you know with this, right? So basically, at the end of the day, human beings are just sacks of flesh, right? We have.
Oh boy, we're off to a good start.
Oh boy.
But no.
Oh jeez.
Listen, Rick. Right. So we like to think that we're special, right? That we're a special species. And yes, we are the most intelligent species. We've done a lot. We've done incredible things, but in all reality, at the end of the day, we are still animals, right? And we like to think we're special, and a lot of us actually do believe that we differ from animals in certain ways, but honestly, we're animals, right? And animals are here for two things, right? Actually, well, three. To fuck, right? To survive and to have children. Biologically, that's like our purpose. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I honestly, at the end of the day, really believe that no matter what moral sprinkles that we think that we have on ourselves and that we can be higher thinking individuals, you know what I mean? Like,
For sure. No, I get you.
that we really are no different from any other being on this planet, that we will survive and throw our fellow man under the bus if we have to. And I think that
absolutely.
we are vicious and evil from the inside, and that we guard those things when we can. And I really think that, like, that's sad and that's upsetting, but if we break down each week, right, Olivia, millions of people died. Millions of people died under Mao's regime, right? Children were being sold in literal, like, meat packs to their families. Horrible shit happened. A whole nation suffered.
Yeah, you make a good case.
Right? And
Okay, you've convinced
that's
me.
fair, right? But also, but at the end of the day, I can't blame millions of civilians because of the fact that they had to do what they needed to do to survive during that time. That's awful and that's horrible, but like that was their survival instinct. They had to do what they had to do to keep their head above waters. In the Stanford prison experiment, right? It wasn't so much as a survival thing for me, and I think I'm biased to my own topic because I did a lot more research for my own topic.
Sure.
But like, these men were not prompted in any form or which way to do any of the acts that they did. They simply said, just keep and maintain control in this prison with your fellow inmates, right? And they were vicious to the point by hour 32 there was a major psychological break. And honestly,
It's funny that you say that. Go ahead, sorry.
Well,
I'm putting a pin in what I was going to say.
okay, well, no, you can share your pin.
Well, thank you. Pin it. No, it's funny that you say that because after doing my topic, I was right on board with what you're saying. You might recall that I even said that I was like, this was organic, that they just came up with these things.
Right.
That they must be evil because they came up with these things on their own. And after doing this one for the Salem Witch Trials, I have to believe that the actions of specifically the guards involved in the Stanford prison experiment, that was imitation, that they did what they'd seen.
Right.
And that, like, they were told maintain control, keep order at all, against all odds, like, just do what you have to do. And they were like, shit, I don't know how to do that. I'll just do what I've seen on TV, you know?
Yeah, no. I actually watched a lot of the interviews, Brie, when I was editing it, and I found like a compilation, and like most of the guards said, they told me to keep control, and I didn't really know what that meant, but I basically just acted how I thought they wanted me to act, which was like a prison guard, which like, it could be completely fucking inaccurate. They have no fucking idea.
Right.
And deplorable, for sure. Absolutely deplorable. But, like, it's all they knew how to do.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing, too, is it was like they were playing a character, right?
Yeah.
But the other thing that goes along with it is it's like when I did comparisons in my episode where I would say a lot of it paralleled Nazi regimes, right? And they were like, it wasn't like they were just like, oh, we'll have them do exercises or we'll have them do these awful things. They came up with psychological ways of torture for these men, right? And it's for me, it's like they could have maintained control, but they would have no idea what, like, they didn't see people on TV or John Wayne using psychological torture methods to mold these people into basically like figures of like just kind of conformity, I guess. But also that's the thing too, is it's like I think what ties into both of it and all of it is that, and going into yours, Brooke, is that it started with two little girls, right, that were like, hey, we're practicing like witchcraft, or there's some shit going down. It started with the one family, right? Right. So, and then all of a sudden it massively affected hundreds and hundreds of people because of the fact that these two little girls were doing whatever they were doing at the time, and started this from the socioeconomic like standpoint that you were talking about, sociopolitical. But the thing that all ties it together is, I think a lot of it, and a lot of the people who were involved in everything that we talked about in Mao's China, in the Stanford Prison Experiment, being the guards, and then the two little girls that started the whole thing, and in the Salem as a city, we all realized that like there's it stems from somewhere, that one evil act basically like propagates this like whole idea of groupthink and this domino effect, right? That you will follow suit to survive. But I think that's the thing, is what's going to be our domino effect for our society, right? And for our
already happening.
Life. Right, exactly. And we're already becoming susceptible to it. So I think at the end of the day, what we need to do is that there's a lot of parallels in today's culture. Every single day we see this shit happening, and that it's not changing, that we haven't woken up and been like, remember the Salem Witch Trials? You know, like, that was god-awful. Remember, like, communist China? Fuck that shit.
That was pretty bad.
Right, because we like to think that we're higher than that, but at the end of the day, we're not. That we follow the same fucking patterns. And that as a society... Yeah, and as a society, we need to say, okay, we need to acknowledge it, we need to recognize it, and that's the only saving grace that we have, is not being ignorant. So please don't be ignorant. But also...
Actually, that's a good point. Like, after everything that we've talked about, like, give one solution, like, because I think we all agree that we're on a tipping point right now. We're on a tipping point of violence, of something bad happening, just in the way that we interact with each other.
Right.
Do you think you have maybe a possible solution to avoid that?
I mean, the only thing is... Go ahead.
Well, because I was going to say, it's like, we can't really predict the situations that are happening, right? My roommate and I were sitting on my couch, and she just went, well, you know, I'm not shocked a lot of the time what our president does anymore, but this legitimately made me gasp. And then she showed me that all the children that had died, he had signed autographed frames for, over the pictures of the children that had died.
Yes, I heard about that.
Oh my god.
Yes.
This was like, what? This was a couple nights ago? And, like, that to me was just like a step in our direction of like, this is our ignorant leader, and that a lot of people are gonna follow him and follow that wave and do what they have to do to survive. And I don't know exactly what that wave brings, or what would be the situations that I, in my daily life, have to kind of make moral decisions on, but I don't know.
And that's the thing, is that, like, what do we do as individuals? And I think the only thing we can do is talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
My big thing that I've learned from this is once you've reached the point of fanaticism, it's too late. Which is really unfortunate. Once people have left their homes to tear down street signs that don't support the Communist Party, once beatings start happening, once the first hanging happens, it's too late. Like, you can't really, you'd like to say, like, no, I would speak up, I would stop it.
No,
you'd
no
probably
one would.
be killed. At the point where there's fanaticism, you would probably be killed. So, like, we're not there yet, thankfully, but we are really close. And I think at this point, like, again, we've talked knowledge, number one, because I feel like once we found out more about these issues, like, I became way more aware of me just, like, getting right on the hate train.
Sure.
You know, before considering it. So, like, knowledge is number one for me. But, like, big thing is we really need to push ourselves outside of our comfort zone. And, like, you know when you're, like, hanging out with someone, they say something and you're just like, oh, that made me a little uncomfortable. That was a little tad bit aggressive. But, like, I never say anything because I'm always very shy, right?
Yeah.
You gotta step in and say something before those opinions start snowballing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, and... Yeah, I agree. And the other thing is, like, we're doing this podcast, and a lot of people who are in, like, on the internet and in media try not to let their political opinions seep in, and they're like, oh, I don't talk about politics. I don't really bring up the current events of the day, and, like, that does no good.
Nope.
That does nothing. Like, I understand that people perceive that their job is to entertain people, but I think that there's something bigger than that going on.
So I used to date this guy who would hate to talk to me about politics because of the fact that
oh boy,
like it would just like start like a hostility, and that was like that's a huge red flag. That like if you can't have a conversation about what the fuck's going on, like I don't even care like at what point or what side are you on. Like it's so much better to talk to somebody who's on the opposite side, who's willing to hear you out, than someone who like just like
wants to validate everything you say.
Right, exactly. And so, like, I think having conversations that make us upset is a great thing to do. Because at this point in the day...
we need to have more uncomfortable conversations.
Right. And I think that's a great point in our podcast, right? Because our podcast is a little dark. Well...
yeah, just a touch.
Just a bit.
A little dark. But I think... the reason that it's great is because of the fact that we do present these issues and we say, look, now that we know more, and now that we're saying, hey, we're aware of these things, we can make steps in the right direction. And it's not fun stuff to talk about, right? I'd rather not know that children were sold in the market as meat. You know? Also, I'd rather not know that I could easily kill a human being with a fatal amount of shocks just because someone told me to do so. Or that I would point a finger at a neighbor who I knew was going to get killed to get some of those sweet, sweet butter churners, right? But at the same time...
gotta get those butter churners.
Get those fucking butter churners.
It's summer.
Hey, they're
gotta get butter
Cuisinarts,
churners.
All right? But...
oh, man.
Right. So, you know, but at the end of the day, I think that talking about those things and making yourself aware and is so vitally important. And I think it's interesting, and I think we need to have these conversations on what exactly keeps us up at night.
Yeah, dude,
Name drop.
I hope you're listening to this. I hope you've listened to all of the other ones, because they all really mush together. It's
They
like
sure
a storyline.
do.
We grow, we change.
Yeah,
Together.
we're like a s'more.
Yes.
One of us is a graham cracker and chocolate and the marshmallow, and we all come together to make gooey goodness.
Yeah, that definitely would give me acid reflux, but
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I would still eat it.
Worth.
Jesus.
Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
Thank you for listening in. And
Thank
I
you.
hope that groupthink is just one of those things that keeps you up at night.
Hell yeah.
Absolutely. Signing off.
Deuces.
Night, everybody.